Magandang araw po sa ating lahat. Andito na po ang inyong lingkod, si Teacher Arnel, para gabayan kayo kung paano magsulat ng isang research. So, ang tatalakayin po natin ngayon ay ang sampling. Napakalaga ng sampling sa paggawa ng research. So, ano nga ba ang sampling? Pag tinawag nating sampling, it is selecting the group that you will actually collect data from in your research. So, example, a researcher intends to identify the factors affecting the students' absenteeism in Masipag National High School. So, kung gusto mong malaman kung ano ang mga dahilan, kung bakit ang mga mag-aaral sa Masipag High School o National High School ay laging lumiliban o absent. Ngayon, sa pamamagitan ng sampling, hindi mo na kailangan magbigay ng survey questionnaire sa lahat ng estudyante. Assuming 1,500 na estudyante doon, bibigyan mo ba ng 1,500 na questionnaire ang mga estudyante doon? Masyadong marami, magastos, at nakakapagod. So, yun po ang isa sa mga dahilan kung bakit kailangan po ng sampling para mabawasan po ang mga ibibigay nating survey questionnaire. Ngayon, bago tayo tumuloy, isa-isa natin ang mga ibig sabihin ng mga salita na ginagamit natin. Ang una po ay sample. Pag tinawag na sample, is a subset of individuals from larger population. Kung ang isang paaralan o isang lugar o mga grupo ng tao ay may 100 populasyon, so kung ang bibigyan mo kon ay 80 lang o 70, yun ang tinatawag na sample. So, hindi mo na bibigyan lahat. Yung 70 na lang o 80. Ngayon, pag tinawag naman population, these are the group of elements from which a researcher samples and to which she or he might like to generalize. Ito naman yung kabuuan, dami ng bibigyan mo ng questionnaire. For example, 100 ang enrollee sa isang paaralan, so 100 ang population. Pero hindi po yun ang bibigyan natin, kundi yung sample na nabanggit natin kanina. So, halimbawa, 109 students from 4 courses in grade 11 with a total population of 150. So, saan doon ang population? 150. At ano naman ang sample? 109. Okay, tuloy natin. So, bakit kailangan natin ng sample? So, una, to learn something about a large group without having to study every member of the group. So, bakit natin kailangan puntahan ng 1,000 kung pwede naman ang 300 lang o 400? Mas makatipid ka sa pagod at sa pera. Time and cost. Ayan na. Studying every single instance of a thing is impractical or too expensive. So, example po ng sampling ay yung survey. So, bakit gumagamit ng sample? So, to improve data quality. To obtain in-depth information about each subject rather than superficial data on all. Data determines accuracy of research survey result and allows researchers to gather the same answer from a sample. Tanong, when is sampling unnecessary? So, kailangan po natin hindi ginagamit ang sampling. Una, when the number of things we want to sample is small. So, kung 10 lang yan, 12, 20, hindi na kailangan. Lahatin mo na dahil konti lang naman. Next, data is easily accessible. Data quality is unaffected by the number of things we look at. Example, you are interested in the relationship between team shooting average and winning percentage of major basketball teams. There are only 30 teams, and data on team shooting averages and winning percentages are readily available. So, sinusulat na yan ng mga secretary o ng mga iba pang mga officials. Kaya hindi mo na kailangang i-research o gumamit ng sampling. So, dumako naman po tayo sa types of sampling. So, ang una ay non-probability sampling, which is a sampling method in which not all members of the population have an equal chance of participating in the study, while probability sampling is a method of sampling that utilizes some form of random selection. Now, there are four types of non-probability sampling: the purposive sampling, the quota sampling, snowball sampling, and convenience sampling. Now, for purposive sampling, it is a non-probability sampling procedure that involves selecting elements based on a researcher's judgment about which elements will facilitate his or her investigation. While quota sampling is a non-probability sampling procedure that involves describing the target population in terms of what are thought to be relevant criteria and then selecting sample elements to represent the relevant subgroups in proportion to their presence in the target population. So pag naabot na po ang quota, so stop na. Hindi na po kailangang mamili pa uli. Next is the snowball sampling. It is a non-probability sampling procedure that involves using members of the group of interest to identify other members of the group. So, nagsimula po tayo dito sa isa. Yung isa, pinilian ng dalawa. So, nagsabi ng dalawa. And yung dalawa, nagsabi ng tig-tatlo. And then, yung tatlo, nagsabi ng mas marami pa. So, that is snowball sampling. Next is convenience sampling. So when we say convenience sampling, it is a non-probability sampling procedure that involves selecting elements that are readily accessible to the researcher, sometimes called an available subject sample. For example, naglalakad ka and may nakita kang mga tao at ang topic mo ay nainigarilyo, so kausapin mo na agad at bigyan ng interview o questionnaire yung nainigarilyo na nakita mo na tao. So that is convenience sampling. Now let's go now to probability sampling. So it refers to the selection of a sample from a population. There are four types of probability sampling: the simple random sampling, stratified sampling, systematic sampling, and the cluster sampling. Now for simple random sampling, here's an example. A simple random sample might consist of the names of 35 employees drawn from a hat from a company of 350 employees. The population in this case is all 350 employees, and the sample is random because every employee has an equal chance of being selected. So, parang palabunutan. For stratified sampling, it is a sampling method that involves dividing a population into smaller subgroups called strata. Now, in this example, so you will notice the population and consists of 4 strata, and samples are taken from the different groups. Now, let's go to cluster sampling. So when we say cluster sampling, it is a probability sampling technique where researchers divide the population into multiple groups or clusters for research. Now, for you to understand better, I compare the stratified random sampling from cluster sampling. So, for stratified random sampling, one individual or two individuals may be used as sample from each group, while for cluster sampling, for different groups, one group or two groups can be used as sample, not individual. Now, next is systematic sampling. So when we say systematic sampling, it is a type of probability sampling method in which sample members from a larger population are selected according to a random starting point but with a fixed periodic interval. So these are the examples. This is the simple random sample, systematic sample, stratified sample, and cluster sample. Now, for you to understand better, for today, I will use sample size calculation using Taro Yamane's calculator. or formula which he developed in 1967. Now, the formula is n, small letter, is equivalent to capital letter N over 1 plus NE squared, where N is the population size, the small letter n is sample size, and the letter E is the level of precision or standard error or margin of error. Now, to compute, using Zambales formula, the population is 150, margin of error is 0.05. So, to determine the sample size, we will compute 150 divided by 1 plus 150 times the square of margin of error, which is 0.05. So, the answer is 109.09 or 109. Therefore, out of 150 students, we will just give a survey questionnaire to 109 students. Okay, I hope you learned from this topic. And before I finish, let me tell you about the quote of Aristotle. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Thank you for listening and keep safe. God bless.